Hello Leafs Nation, I'm Rick Scarborough and you're watching Blue and White Weekly, where we bring you weekly updates on the Leafs and the hockey world at large. Training camps are underway across the NHL, so let's check in and see what's happening as players hit the ice once again. Before we get to the Leafs, let's take a look at the biggest headlines around the league this week. Bruins GM Don Sweeney has fired shots at popular podcast Spit and Chicklets, after host Ryan Whitney reported details he had heard that RFA goaltender Jeremy Swayman's extension talks were not going well. Sweeney denied that rumor completely and went as far as to refer to the show as spitting up on yourself. Coincidentally, spitting up on yourself is what I do after chugging a bottle of Pink Whitney. Victor Hedman has been named the 11th captain in Tampa Bay Lightning history, and we all pretended to be shocked by this announcement. Speaking of Lightning captains, the Nashville Predators released this photo of Steven Stamkos sporting his new uniform. That just looks wrong. I don't like it. Sidney Crosby has signed a 3-year extension with the Pittsburgh Penguins, carrying an average annual value of $8,700. Yet another player who has managed to match their contract to their jersey number. By that logic, Mitch Marner should be willing to settle for $1,600 next year. Speaking of, let's move into what the Leafs have been up to at this first week of camp. To start off, we're going to throw to our ringside reporter, Riley Roberts.
Hey Rick, thanks very much. The Leafs look great on the ice, with Coach Berube taking the team through the paces in what can only be described as a grueling camp thus far. A few notable absences from camp, unfortunately due to injury though. You may remember that Fraser Minten, who looked promising last weekend in the prospect tournament against the Canadiens in Montreal, took an awkward hit into the boards in Game 2 last Sunday. He's been ruled out with a high ankle sprain. There's no timeline on his return just yet. Forward Connor Dewar is out for the start of the season after getting shoulder surgery this summer, and defense prospect Ben Danford officially has a concussion after taking a hit in practice a few weeks ago. However, he is skating with Marlies coach John Gruden in non-contact drills. Last week, I highlighted several names of prospects to look out for at camp this year, but I want to give a special shout-out to one name I omitted from my list, Nikita Grabenkin. The 21-year-old winger stands at 6'2", 210 pounds, and was a huge factor in helping Middelburg Magnitogorsk take home the Gagarin Cup in the KHL last year. Grabenkin signed an entry-level deal with the Leafs this season after being picked 135th overall by the team in 2022. If it sounds like I'm impressed by him, I am, and I'm not the only one. Head coach Craig Berube made sure to mention the player when asked by media who he liked the look of so far at camp, saying, quote, "It was a tough practice, but his pace didn't drop off. Some real good stuff. You know I like his size." Grabenkin skated with Pontus Holmberg and Max Pacioretty on Friday, and if that sounds like an odd combination, you're right, but the Leafs are open to trying everything in these first few days of camp. That said, Berube has locked in his roster for Sunday night's preseason matchup against the Ottawa Senators, with a good mix of top players and rookies that are getting a chance to shine. We look forward to bringing you more from the rink next week, but for now, I'll send it back to you in the studio.
In other Leafs news, the O's have been found. Last week, we discussed the missing O's on social media. Turns out this was done to promote Oreo as the team's new helmet sponsor. With the Leafs sporting both cookies and milk on their uniform this year, I would not be shocked if they announced a new mascot, Santa Claus. Lance Hornby of the Toronto Sun reported that Max Domi and Simone Benoit got into a, quote, wrestling match after an intense drill on Friday morning. We'll see them settle their differences this week on Monday Night Raw. And finally, the Leafs have confirmed several times throughout camp that they will once again be trying William Nylander at the center position during camp and into the season this year. With how often the Leafs try this and how often it doesn't work, it's starting to remind me of every time I call my ex-wife. Try it once a year and then give up at the first sign of trouble. And that will do it for this edition of Blue and White Weekly. See you next week, Leafs Nation, and until then, keep your stick on the ice.